Hi everyone, hope you're all doing good. So this video for you guys today is about 7 strategies to overcome your insatiable appetite. So I've been putting out some posts on social media recently. I've been chatting to some of you guys, asking what your biggest struggles are, your biggest challenges when dieting, what you'd like help with and what you'd like to see me create some content on. And this one came out really strongly. So I've decided to film a video on it for you guys to help you out. And essentially what I'll be chatting through is the strategies that I use to help my clients and to help people overcome their appetite when dieting. So also things like temptation and cravings when dieting. So I'll take you through the strategies you can use to overcome these obstacles. So broadly speaking, people who diet, they know what foods are healthy. So everyone knows fruits and vegetables are healthy, and McDonald's and KFC aren't. So people know, generally speaking, what they should be eating. People want to be slimmer, right? So if they're dieting, it's probably because they're trying to lose weight. And so when you consider that people know what they should be eating and they know what they want to do, you've got to ask yourself the question, why are the long-term success rates so low? And essentially it's because of this. It's because of your appetite, your cravings and temptation. So even if you're able to sort of push through it in the short term when your motivation's high, long-term success rates for diets are really quite low. So people can lose a bit of weight in the short term, but actually keeping it off is what people struggle with. And that's because when you lose weight, your appetite gets stronger, and cravings tend to get more intense, and it cues your body to eat more, and it's really hard to resist that. Your body is almost fighting the weight loss. In a evolutionary sense, losing weight isn't a good thing, so your brain is wired to stop you from doing that, essentially. So I'm going to take you through the 7 strategies I use with my clients to help them overcome this issue when dieting. So number 1 is to just remove the temptation from your environment. So this is the most straightforward and probably the most effective one as well. So this involves clearing out tempting foods, so simply don't keep them in the house. It's a case of out of sight, out of mind. If you've got food there, it's going to be eaten. So the best thing to do, if possible, is to just not keep it in the house. Now, I know a lot of us live with families, partners, kids, whatever, and if they're not dieting, you can't tell them, right, we're not allowed any unhealthy food in the house. So if you know that there's foods that are tempting for you, whether it's, crisps or biscuits or whatever, try and hide them. So keep them in a separate cupboard to where you keep the other food you usually have. You could keep them in a sort of opaque container so you can't see through. It's amazing how even really small changes like that can have a big impact on our behavior. Ultimately, our brain is lazy. It wants to conserve effort and conserve energy. It doesn't want us to do tasks that are effortful. And so doing things like that, like putting them in a separate cupboard, putting them in a container where you can't see them, it keeps them out of sight, it keeps them out of mind, essentially. And what we're essentially trying to do with this is increasing the amount of effort it takes to eat unhealthily. So if you've not got foods in your house, the effort you would have to take to eat unhealthily would be to go to the shops and buy some unhealthy food. And for a lot of us, we wouldn't be willing to do this, basically. Essentially, when you are in an environment where you've got tempting foods around you, and maybe your trigger foods, that they're, like digestives, for example, they're one that you can't just have one. If you have one, it's going to cascade into having half a pack, yeah? So what you want to do is minimize the amount of willpower you need to use. So if you're surrounded by these foods, you're constantly using willpower. Every time you open the fridge or open the cupboard, you're going to have to, you see that and you're tempted, and you're going to have to go, no, I'm trying to lose weight, I'm not going to eat that. And that takes its toll on you. Willpower it's like a muscle. You can only use it a certain amount of times before it's weak and you can't use it anymore. So that is the number 1 strategy. Number 2 is to separate eating from other activities. So eat at the dinner table. Don't eat while you've got your phone in one hand and your fork in the other. Don't eat with the TV on in the background, because these are all distractions, and what they do is they take you away from the experience of eating your food. And so what you want to do is separate the activity, and you want to eat slowly and be more mindful when you're eating, and this will allow you to focus completely on the experience of eating, and that will lead to being more satiated and more satisfied by a meal. You'll find often, if you've got your phone, or maybe you've even on your phone and you've got the TV in the background and you're also eating at the same time, you'll sit down with your food and it'll be gone before you realise, and maybe you've scarfed it down so quickly that you don't even feel full or satisfied at the end of it. So eat at the dinner table, remove distractions, so screens, anything that's going to take you away from the experience of eating. Make sure you eat slowly, make sure you chew your mouthfuls properly, try and put your cutlery down in between each mouthful so you have time to actually eat, and be mindful of it. And the other thing as well is that if you stop eating while watching the TV, your brain stops associating these two activities with each other. So if every night you finish work, after dinner you sit down in front of the TV and you have some biscuits, your brain associates those two activities. So when you sit down in front of the TV, your brain is like, right, time for biscuits, and it starts getting that craving for it because it associates those two activities with each other. If you separate these activities, so when you're watching TV, you're only watching TV. If you have some food, you have it at the table and separately from other activities, your brain stops associating those two things with each other. So you don't get the cravings as much. And if you are sitting in front of the TV and you have this rule that, right, I only eat at the dinner table, I don't eat while I'm doing other things, then you have a small craving for something, some biscuits. You're not going to go and sit at the dinner table to eat a biscuit and then go back to sitting in front of the TV. So if you have that rule, it increases the amount of effort required to fulfill that craving to eat. Number 3 is a bit of a controversial one, is to stop snacking, or at least if you don't stop it, minimize it and focus much more on full meals. So you want to be in full meals spread evenly throughout the day. You don't want to be, and this is something I see really commonly, it's just sort of snacking and just having like lower calorie versions and stuff like that throughout the day and never really having a full meal. And this leads into something that I've called myself is the not quite cycle. And essentially what this little invention is, it's a cycle of feeling not quite satisfied and not quite hungry as well. So you have a meal, you're not quite satisfied by it, and then you go a little while and then you're not quite hungry, and then you eat again, and you never go through the full stage of having a meal, being completely satisfied, and then several hours later you start to feel a decent amount of hungry, a reasonable amount of hunger, and then you have a meal again. You end up in this just not quite cycle where you're not quite getting hungry and you're not quite satisfying yourself with your meals. Also, one of the main reasons I recommend to stop snacking, or at least minimize it, is that snack foods typically are really easy to overeat. You've got crisps, sweets, all sorts of things like that. They're easy, they're packaged, they're processed, and they're easy to overeat. So that's why I recommend sort of forgoing them in place of having some full meals. And if you do snack, which is fine, it's not kind of stop your progress, but it's just potentially a good tactic. Consider your choices as well. So have things like fruit or yogurt, things that are natural, minimally processed, and that are satiating, that will fill you up, rather than crisps, biscuits, stuff like that's not going to fill you up. And even things like I'll come on to in a minute, things like Fiber One bars and other like low calorie sort of faux healthy things, I would recommend sticking to whole or minimally processed foods. So following on from that, number 4 is to limit hyperpalatable foods. And hyperpalatable is basically just tasty, so foods that are easy to overeat, and this is usually because they contain large amounts of fat, salt and sugar. And essentially it's these extreme tastes. So the reason they're hyperpalatable is because they're extremely easy to overeat, and they're not the sort of tastes that occur naturally in nature so often. And your brain gets familiar with these tastes, and that's how cravings develop. So if you're constantly eating really fatty, deep fried foods, or really sugary cakes and treats and stuff like that, your brain gets used to that sensation, and that is your normal. Your perception of something that's sweet is is normalized for that. So you might now begin to think a donut is just a nice level of sweetness, whereas if you weren't so used to that and you hadn't got into the habit of eating things like that, it might be almost too sweet to enjoy. And this is where I come on to things like Fiber One bars, grenade bars, protein bars, just in general. These I would count as hyperpalatable foods. So although they're lower calorie than the junk foods you've got here on the left, they still stimulate your brain with that sweet sensation. So not to say you can't eat these when dieting. Loads of people do. Loads of people have success when dieting and including these treats in their diet. However, if you are someone who struggles with your appetite, if you're someone who struggles with cravings and temptations, then minimizing these or not having these when dieting could help reduce the sensation of those cravings and temptations, because you're not having those extremely sweet flavors essentially. And if you're the sort of person, you get to the stage where vegetables don't taste nice or vegetables taste boring, then it's probably because you're having such extreme flavors in other foods that you're eating. And the little caveman there is just to remind me that in a evolutionary environment, so back in the day, if you will, if we found something like this, if we found a donut, for example, grown on a tree in the wild, our brain is hardwired to eat that and eat as much of that as possible, because something like that would be very, very rare. So in terms of a realistic example, maybe it could be finding honey. So it would be an adaptive trait to eat as much as possible, because something like that is rare to find, provides lots of energy and lots of calories, because food was more scarce in those environments. So when you find food, you want to eat it, especially if it's calorie dense. Now we have supermarkets and shops on basically every corner. So food is not scarce. We have so much food, and it's all this hyperpalatable food. So while our brain is still wired to eat as much of this food as possible, it's not in sync with our environment. So where these used to be extremely rare in the environment, now you can find them everywhere basically. So limit these amount of foods, these types of foods. And then on the flip side of that, number 5 is to prioritize minimally processed foods. So these are generally hard to overeat. If you look at the foods on the slide, no one's ever overeaten, apples and got fat because of it. So these foods generally are hard to overeat. And the more you eat them as well, the more you get used to the taste. So if you feel like any of these foods are boring at the moment, it's probably because you don't eat enough of them and you have too many hyperpalatable foods with those extreme flavor profiles. The reason these are hard to overeat, so they're less calorie dense, they don't contain as many calories per gram. Generally speaking, they tend to be higher protein, and they also tend to be higher in fiber as well. And these three things lead to them being more satiating. Essentially, they're more satisfying, which leads to them being harder to overeat. And like I alluded to before, you adapt to the taste as well. So if you're looking at this slide thinking, oh god, these foods are all boring, then the more you eat them, the more you get used to them, and the more you can actually appreciate the tastes of these more natural, minimally processed foods. Number 6 is don't allow hunger to become too extreme. So if you're someone that struggles with cravings a lot, and in my personal experience, a lot of people I've spoken to who struggle with cravings tend to be on the two ends of the sort of hunger spectrum. So they're trying to maybe push fasting for as long as possible, and then overeating as well. And it's knowing what works for you. So I know intermittent fasting is super trendy, but it's not magic, it's not special. Essentially what you need to do is find out what works for you. Intermittent fasting is great for some people. For some people, they can wake up, they don't even think about breakfast, they don't even want anything, and then they just eat lunch and dinner, and then that helps them to reduce calories. Some people, you wake up, you're already thinking about food, and you're already feeling hungry. If you then try and skip breakfast and wait till lunchtime, maybe you're starving by the time lunchtime comes around, and you end up overeating throughout the day and undoing the eating window where you haven't eaten earlier in the day. So I shouldn't have to say this, but I do have to say it because of people that I've spoken to. I know it's the case. If fasting causes you to overeat, don't do it. If you know that you're the sort of person where trying to push that hunger is going to cause you to overeat, when you do, don't do it, because it's a double-edged sword. Because if you're pushing your hunger too extreme, by the time you do come around to eat, you can easily undo the work you've done prior. And then my recommendation as well is to spread your meals evenly throughout the day. So don't do anything strange like eat all your meals within just a few hours of each other. Spread your meals evenly throughout the day, and that will allow you to get out of the not quite cycle and to actually experience complete satiation after a meal, and then get into the stage where you're actually feeling proper hunger, and it's not your sort of brain saying go on, let's eat something. It's actual, the physical sensation of hunger. And so you can achieve that by spreading your meals evenly throughout the day, and then not getting too far either end of the hunger spectrum. And then finally, number 7 is to consult your future self. So this is a psychological technique called episodic future thinking, and basically what it involves is removing yourself from the moment, thinking towards the future, and thinking how this decision is going to affect you in the future. So if you can remove yourself from the momentary temptation, remove yourself from in the moment, you've got the little devil on your shoulder saying, go on, just have a little snack, it will be fine. Try and think towards the future. So remember your goals, remember the reasons why you're dieting, and the hard work you've put in so far. And then ask yourself, would your future self thank you? So the decision you're about to make, is it going to benefit you in the future, or are you just delay discounting? Are you just satisfying some momentary sort of impulses to shortchange yourself in the future? If you're following the 6 previous steps up till now, then your cravings will be much less. Your temptations will be reduced. It won't be maybe what it is like now. It's like persistent chattering. You're just constantly thinking about food, constantly thinking about snacking. It will be more like an occasional whisper. You'll just get every now and then maybe just a little whisper of temptation. And consulting your future self, thinking towards the future, can allow you to just think, no, remember your goals, remember your reasons, and make the right decision in the moment. And so that's it. So let's just have a quick recap. So 7 strategies to overcome your insatiable appetite: remove temptation from your environment, separate eating from other activities, stop snacking, limit hyperpalatable foods, prioritize minimally processed whole foods, don't allow hunger to become too extreme, and finally, consult your future self. So if you're the sort of person who struggles with this, if you found this information useful and maybe you'd like a bit extra help, go to jamesnicholnutrition.com/apply. And that's it. So thank you for watching. I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe to my channel. If you click the bell notification as well, it will mean you get notifications when I post any videos. I'm planning to do a lot more videos in the future. Please make sure to like and comment. If you've got any suggestions for future videos as well, they're all more than welcome, so comment them below this video. And that's it. I hope you found this useful. See you in the next one.